Before the Grand Prix circus heads off to the newly united Germany, it's time to take stock of where the teams stand at the halfway point of the season. McLaren Honda. A season of two halves, or rather a half season of two quarters so far for the Woking Wonders, as a record-breaking 4 consecutive wins at the start of the season for Senna saw him and the team leading their championships by a huge margin, but it has become apparent that those wins were despite car troubles and only came because of the greater problems suffered by Williams, Ferrari and the rest. Williams in particular are now emerging as the team to beat, but there's still a long way to go as yet, and Ron Dennis is not known for cheerfully accepting defeat and trying again next year. He and Honda will be working hard to regain the advantage. Tyell Honda. There was a real sense of optimism around Tyrrell at the start of this year, and although Stefano Modena has done well enough, they'll be disappointed with their lack of reliability in particular so far. The departure of Harvey Postlethwaite won't have helped, and it turns out that when you have a nicely balanced chassis, simply sticking a bigger engine in the back doesn't necessarily translate to a better car. The Pirelli tyres, which just don't seem to be as good this season, probably aren't helping either. Instead of kicking on to establish themselves as best of the rest behind McLaren, Williams, Ferrari and Benetton, they're looking considerably less impressive than the brand new Jordan team. Williams Renault. For 4 races, it looked like 1991 was going to be another frustrating year for Frank and Patrick, with the unreliability of new technology putting paid to their races, and the British press had the knives out for Nigel Mansell very quickly, especially as his return from Ferrari seems to have galvanised Riccardo Patrese into showing some of his best form ever, particularly in qualifying. How quickly things can change. It took just 1 win at Magny-Cours for Mansell to be restored to national hero status, even before his triumphant Silverstone weekend. At the moment, he looks the most likely championship challenger to Senna. Bram Yamaha. Yamaha engines are regarded as the millstone that sank the Zakspeed team, and it's starting to look like they might do the same to Brabham. The power is slowly increasing as the engines are tweaked, but it's just not happening fast enough, and between all of the other components breaking, mostly gearboxes, and the natural attrition rate of running in midfield or further back, neither Brundle nor Blundell have had much chance to show their quality. Internal turmoils over ownership and management and a fast evaporating bank of sponsors isn't helping either, and the team will have to endure the trials of pre-qualifying now, much to the chagrin of Martin Brundle, who turned down a drive with Jordan and allegedly one with Mod and Lambo too, on the grounds that he didn't want to have to pre-qualify. Footwork Ford. Another team weighed down by their engines, in this case the dreadful Porsche 3512, which seems in fact to have been 2 V6s welded together, and was certainly overweight and underpowered. The kludge needed to make the Ford engine fit the chassis is likely to be the main problem going forward, but there's also an increasing sense that Alboreto and Johansson are both past their sell-by dates, while Caffey seems to have rather fallen out with Jackie Oliver, so there are problems in the cockpit too. Lotus Judd. It looked at Imola as if Lotus were on the verge of a recovery as they made up 20 grid places each to come in 5th and 6th, with a combative drive from the otherwise unimpressive Julian Bailey to boot. But they've never looked much like repeating that feat, and the car is still very bare of sponsors, with logos occasionally appearing for a single race, but no whiff of that big money title sponsorship they need to replace the camel money. Hakkinen seems like a decent find at least, but even he's failed to qualify once and had more unforced errors than they'd probably like. Fondmetal Ford. The new Fomet 1 chassis introduced at Imola actually looks quite good, and Gouillard turned some heads qualifying at 10th in France. But between the Jordans and the Delaras dominating PQ, and the team's lack of money and reliability, they've rarely made it to Saturday, never mind the race. They'll be hoping that getting rid of the red and green cars in favour of the less impressive Brabham, AGS and Footwork squads will mean they have more of a chance to make an impact. Leighton House Illmore. Another midfield team with engine troubles. It's difficult to know if the CG911 chassis is any good or not because the Illmore engine keeps failing. They usually qualify reasonably, if not particularly impressively, and when running, Capelli and Gugelmin usually keep it somewhere in the upper midfield, and if they could just finish, they'd have probably picked up a few points by now. As it is, the 2 loyal drivers are becoming increasingly frustrated, most notably team co-owner Ivan Capelli, who's yet to see the checkered flag in an absolute mare of a season so far. AGS Ford. At Phoenix, AGS couldn't even afford to buy their mechanics lunch. All the more impressive then that Tarquini not only managed to haul the car into the race, but actually finished 8th. That, though, has been the high point of the year, with not a sniff of race day since Monaco. New owners, new paint job, but unless some sponsorship appears soon, it's difficult to see how they can keep going. Stefan Johansson may or may not be a bit past it now, but it's uncertain how much of an improvement an untried rookie like Barbatza could be. Hopefully he'll get to start a race before the end of the year. Who knows, he might even finish one. Benetton Ford. The Benetton team have spent several years now being solid, dependable points and podium scorers and occasionally picking up a lucky win when the top teams faltered. That hasn't really been enough for the Benetton family, who are starting to look to divest, and it's notable that the 1991 livery actually has almost no visible Benetton branding on it. Piquet is enjoying himself, but he has been around a while now, and Roberto Moreno has never quite lived up to that second place in Japan, much as everyone loves the cheery little Brazilian. Bringing in Tom Walkinshaw, who has vast experience in motor racing but very little F1 pedigree, is an interesting move, but buying into the team shows he's committed, and it will certainly be an interesting future. BMS Scuderia Italia Delara Judd. The Delara F191 is a good car, and while it lacks the all-out power to be a regular point scorer, in the capable hands of JJ Leto it has done well when its usually financially related reliability issues allow it. The Judd V10 was built especially for the car, and part of the problem has been the usual unreliability and teething issues of a new engine in its first year. Emanuele Pirro has been less impressive than his teammate, failing to pre-qualify on a number of occasions, although a couple of them weren't really his fault. But luckily, thanks to his teammate, he won't have to anymore. Minardi Ferrari. Like Tyrrell, Minardi entered 1991 with high hopes based on a highly rated new engine deal, but have been disappointed with the results. It's certainly been an improvement on 1990 though, with Martini scoring points at Imola and the team having had a couple of sevenths too, which could easily have been more points. Morbidelli, now he's found his feet, is looking like a strong driver and possibly a future star, while Martini is solid and dependable as ever, but you'd love to see what he could do in something a bit better. Ligier Lamborghini. Guy Ligier always said this was going to be a bit of a development year, putting pieces in place for a serious challenge in 1992 and onwards. He's certainly making all the right noises about that, with the Renault Works engine deal already in place, and a persistent rumour that he's trying to tempt an unsettled Alain Prost away from Ferrari to build a French super team around. As for 1991, Thierry Boutsen has performed better of the two drivers, as you might expect given his experience, while Comas has struggled to qualify the overweight car, failing on 3 occasions. He'll be hoping to improve his record in the latter half of the season, lest his time in F1 prove brief. Ferrari. The 642 chassis with which the team began the season proved not only unreliable but also to have severe handling issues, and despite having decent results by most team standards, the development of the new 643 was rushed through, and to be fair, seems to be much more like it. Prost asked for and got softer suspension, and they've also re-sighted the exhaust pipes to give a bit of extra airflow over the rear wing, so it's all a work in progress. Alesi, meanwhile, has looked promising rather than the finished article, where he's willing to have a go at Prost, but he overdoes things too much. Lola Ford. Doesn't look too bad on paper, with 2 points finishes keeping the team well clear of pre-qualifying, but those 2 races, plus Bernard's 9th in Monaco, are the team's only 3 finishes in 16 attempts so far. The team have gone into receivership, which should at least keep the creditors from the door until the end of the season, and give them a chance to do well on track and pick up some more sponsorship, but there's definitely a cloud hanging over the team. Coloni Ford. Highly rated he may be, but Pedro Chavez is trying to pre-qualify what is basically a 1989 car with a 1990 engine, and it's not really a reflection on him that he's not been very successful. It can't be an easy introduction to F1. The team were rumoured to be looking at Andrea de Cesaris, and whatever your thoughts on him, you wonder whether somebody with more experience would be having a better time of it. Jordan Ford. It's been a while since a new F1 team made the same impact that Jordan have made in their first half season. The car is widely reckoned to be the best looking on the grid in its distinctive green livery with flowing lines, and if drivers Gasho and De Cesaris were signed because they were available and well backed, they've not done too badly at all, with De Cesaris in particular doing much to excise his old reputation after some careful mentoring by Eddie Jordan. You wouldn't be surprised if one of these guys stood on the podium before the season was up. Modena Lamborghini. Initial promise with a good qualification and 7th place at Phoenix has gone largely unfulfilled, with the exception of Van der Poel's Imola heroics, which should have netted the team 2 points. and the cars struggle to make it out of pre-qualifying most of the time. That 7th place for Larini has been enough to get them out of PQ though, and they will now have to show that they deserve that. As ever though, finances are a problem. Lamborghini's initial lump sum is gone and there's no more coming from that direction, so the car is becoming a sea of little sponsor stickers and they'll be looking for a major deal for next year.